Welcome, my MTG friends, supporters, and MTG zealots. Let us talk about the new mechanic out of Kaldhiem called Foretell. And let's talk about one card in particular that I find is gonna probably be problematic, where we have MTG's R&D starting to scratch their head going, oh man, did we just pull another Oko? I don't know. Is this an Oko situation? It very well could be, just depending. Now, let's talk about the actual mechanic itself first before we dive into that card, which, by the way, is going to be Dream Devourer. Okay, Doomscar, which is a good example, is a 5-drop in white that is a mass removal, Wrath of God, destroy all creatures. But it has a foretell cost of colorless white, which means that you can pay 2 colorless out of your hand to put it into exile, face down, so you know what it is, your opponent doesn't know what it is, and then you can play that spell on a later turn. That's very specific wording that they have on the cards. You can't play it same turn. So on another turn. So you pay it for 2, and then on another turn, you can play Doomscar for colorless white to wipe the board. That's pretty snazzy, considering that Wrath and Wraths are usually 4 pips and 5, depending on which type of Wrath that you're doing. Okay, so we're on the same page here. The other thing I like to note is this mechanic is similar to, say, cycling, where, you know, you cycle a card. They can't counter that cycling effect. So if you decide to do the Foretell out of your hand, there's nothing they can do about it. It ends up in exile. Okay? I mean, unless, of course, they have some very specific card in their hand that counters an ability, etc., etc., etc. But that's a pretty deep dive, which we definitely don't need to get into. Let's now talk about Dream Devourer and why I think it's a little janky son. Dream Devourer is a 2-drop 03 Demon Cleric. Each non-land card in your hand without Foretell has Foretell. So now all of your hand has Foretell. Its Foretell cost is equal to its mana cost reduced by 2. So for perfect clarification here, that means if, say, it was colorless green after you've spent the 2 to make it in exile face down, that means it can only be reduced by its colorless mana. So it would in essence be reduced by 1, where you'd still need to pay green to do the Foretell. The other point of clarification is that if it's a sorcery spell, for instance, then you can play it at its sorcery speed. But if you have a card that has Foretell on it that is an instant, you can certainly play it at instant speed. Just gotta remember that it has to be during another turn, and then you are actually casting that card. Pretty cool. All right, then the other thing about Devourer is whenever you foretell a card, Dream Devourer gets +2/+0 until end of turn, which is just kind of an extra little bonus. The other thing to note is that regardless of whether Dream Devourer is in play, once you've already put a card into exile, you can still play it regardless of whether Dream Devourer is in play or not. Makes sense? Cool. Lastly, I'd like to mention that since this Foretell in Kaldhiem has hit standard, I think we're going to see an uptick in a very specific card if people are playing white, and that is Drannith Magistrate. Because as of this recording, that means that Foretell is in play as well as the adventure mechanic. So Drannith has your opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. So are we going to see Drannith mainlined in some white builds, or at least at the very least sideboarded? I think we're going to see an uptick in Drannith depending on how much and how frequently the Foretell mechanic enters the meta. I think it very well could become a staple in the meta just because of how crazy the Foretell situation is. And you add that with adventure, very, very interesting. So tell me what you think. Put some comments in the comment section. What do you think about Foretell? I think it's a pretty cool mechanic. I like it. I'm going to see if I can shoehorn it into some of the stuff I'm climbing the ladder with. What do you think about it? And I definitely think Drannith Magistrate is going to be something that is anti-Foretell for sure. I'm definitely putting this in if I start seeing Foretell plastered all over the meta. All right, thanks for tuning in. Check out our other stuff as usual. Hit the subscribe, hit the like. You know the drill. Thanks for tuning in.